Vielen Dank. Ja, mein Deutsch, however, ist schlecht. Ja, die kleinste Schlückchen Deutsch vielleicht. Ja. Schrecklich. So I will speak in English. I'm sorry, but I will try and speak slowly. If I get excited, just stand up and say langsamer bitte, and I will, try. This is what I'm going to tell you. So I'm really obsessed or interested in digital sovereignty and documents. Documents are full of the most interesting information, and they should be safe and kept private, if that's appropriate. So let's look at some historical perspective here. In the very good old days, you would just have one PC, with maybe 2 floppy disks in the front. And if you wanted to collaborate, you would get friends and you would sit next to the PC and, it would be great. Or maybe you could print the stuff out or post floppy disks around the world. But anyway, it was all nice and slow and easy, and you could see. And if lots of data was going to be leaked, there'd be a big box of it somewhere that, you could track. And well, I still see these footers everywhere, don't waste paper by printing this email. And I still see feature requests from bureaucrats saying, please make printing this look even nicer, It's quite a funny world. Anyway, then of course, networks came along. Networks were great. And I remember being at school as a young boy, and the network was locked down and secure. So we couldn't get games on it, which is very distressing when you're a small child. So I would hack the BIOS to enable the floppy drive that had been disabled in the BIOS. I think the modern equivalent is putting sort of glue in USB connectors so you can't plug things in, And eventually they got wise to me and they removed the cable inside the computer that connected the floppy drive to the thing. And then I unscrewed the computer while they weren't there and put it back in. And then, but you see the sort of arms race. But an important part of this that will come to you later is that unless you control, you can't control the end user's device. That's pretty difficult. Anyway, the document data wasn't standardized, really. RTF, they tried. But meanwhile, Microsoft took the whole market. So it was de facto standardized by winning 90% plus market share. And you dumped it all. Oh, I get a laser. Ha-ha. You dump it all on your file server, and life is good. Of course, the modern world is rather different to that. And the network is vast, it's staggeringly vast, and growing all the time. And people are emailing documents all over the world. And they're using standard protocols for that, and they're typically unencrypted, plain text, going over random networks everywhere. And of course, you then have this question of what Office version do you have? They may be incompatible. So again, this has broadly been solved by Microsoft, incompatibility between Office versions by not innovating at all. So the files are the same. The UI changes annoyingly, but basically it's the same thing. So this is much less of a problem these days. But even so, the scale of the problem is now really quite large. And I want to talk about then data portability. How is it that you can escape this world and bring your documents with you? Because that's what people want. They can't lose all of that wisdom in those tablets of stone. And we're up against what's called a legacy-rich product. These very complex Microsoft file formats, and well, there are trillions of them. You think trillion is a large number. It's sort of like the petabyte, but bigger. But there really are vast numbers of documents out there. And there are other standards, like the open document format, but pragmatically, one of the main wins of Open Document was to encourage Microsoft to open their file format and to try and standardize that and make it XML so we can read it and so on. And a huge amount of our work, of course, is interpreting and getting corner cases to match exactly what they do. And so it was great to be involved with that project and encouraging Microsoft. I personally was on the standards committee there, encouraging them to document and open this stuff up and getting just a much better situation for everyone for portability. Which is great. And unfortunately, at the moment, documents really tie us to closed platforms. So, the dominant, the web is now luckily an open platform. And everyone is using this for the Fachverfahren. I'm hoping, vast numbers of these things are being moved to the web, which is fantastic, and liberating us everywhere. And it's cross-platform, cross-device, but And we can even play audio. By 2012, 20 years into the web, we found we could actually play audio from web browsers, in JavaScript. It was fantastic. But it's sort of finishing out the platform edges still. But it's a pretty odd platform to build on. JavaScript is not, it's not the world's best language. It's not really designed so much as a demo that was hacked into existence. But it delivers, and that's great. So what ties you to these proprietary desktops still then is, well, mail, there's really good alternatives for mail, but office productivity and those documents are really, are really key. One of the things that really encourages me is this graph here, which shows you that pretty much open source has won on the web to the fractions of a %. So it's possible, if you have a massive revenue stream, advertising supported, free and open source software, to totally steamroll the market and win it. Now, of course, in my space, productivity, we're just getting started here. Maybe there's 200 million LibreOffice users, something like that. So we're getting somewhere with that piece. And there are very large numbers of millions of Collabora Online users as well, which we can perhaps add or sit alongside that. I'm forgetting what the latest numbers are. Very large. It was 80 million Docker image downloads we have. We don't know how many people are using those, but really quite a lot. So alternatives are growing. And we've seen what that does to devices. Being able to free up to use more open standards. These are all public stats. You can see stat counter there. But the desktop, of course, is changing more slowly. And obviously, if you're passionate about freedom and openness, you want to help drive that, accelerate that trend. But one of the problems here is, of course, your documents still tie you to this platform. And arguably, these are all screenshots from Office 365. Arguably, there is a huge interest in keeping you tied to that platform. There's a large economic benefit to that, and to getting your data into a proprietary cloud and then continuing to lock you in. And we're trying to break that, obviously. So then there's deployment. I mean, wouldn't it be really nice if instead of touching all of these individual PCs, that you could actually deploy stuff that really was a real product, that actually didn't have lots of limitations built in on all of your browsers or your network PCs, centrally manage those in Kubernetes and relax, monitor it, see how it's all going from afar. And yeah, of course, the cloud in theory offers this hope, but gives you very little control. The great joy of it is that you don't care. Someone else upgrades your software and removes the feature you liked and adds the feature you don't like and breaks your user's flow overnight with little to no warning and almost no control, right? The second factor, of course, is that cloud software tends to hyper-centralize stuff. It brings everyone into these giant data centers that then tear down your ability to control and secure and manage where your document data is, whilst also adding a huge honeypot, making it more and more attractive. The more data we stack up in one place, behind one security mechanism with one key to it, the more attractive it is to hack that. So I would argue that what you really want is in the purple box, by no coincidence. You want to be able to control the updates. You want to be able to check stuff and then deploy it. You want to be able to control your versions there. You get custom support, bespoke features, and ideally federate this so you can have your world there and put it behind whatever network infrastructure you like. So secure it however you like. Your own VPN, your own encryption, and then your own network traffic on your own hardware, if you really want that. Or maybe someone else's hardware in your jurisdiction that you trust and have a close business relationship with. So I'd like to talk a little bit about security and encryption and how those sort of intersect with these other things, because there's quite a lot of interesting things in the market. So I like this drawing because my very talented marketing people drew it, and so I have to show it to you. Isn't it nice? A bit busy, you could argue. But there are people over these sides. So here's your laptop, your PC. And what you want to do is you want to edit the documents, which are very safely and securely stored on your server over here, you may see. And you can sort of wander between them, and perhaps you can encrypt both ends of this to try and strengthen that. But ultimately, you're transferring documents often from one end of this to the other. And that brings some problems. Obviously, when you transfer a document, you don't necessarily bring the policy that you want with it, which can be a little bit of a problem. So how can you get your policy from your document, say you can't print it, or you can't put it on a floppy disk, you can't send it to a friend, how can you get that policy out of here and into your laptop? So there are various different approaches for this. I'd like to show you one that actually works. Many people, they let the browser do the policy, but we'll get to that in a second. So this is an approach that works here. It's a little bit elaborate. The problem is, if you want to control what someone else's computer is doing, it's really quite difficult to do that. So this is how a stack that works actually does it. And the problem is that your BIOS ideally needs to be signed, and your hardware verifies your BIOS. And there's a TPM chip on your motherboard that has keys wired into it, and everything is signed all the way up this stack. The BIOS, the bootloader, the Windows operating system, the Office productivity suite, and you get sent a document. This is Microsoft Rights Manager's design, and it's encrypted. And in order to get the key, you have to go and ask somebody, some central cloud, for the key. So that's fine. And the central cloud wants to make sure, before it gives you the key to the document, this whole stack is signed. That when we say, don't print this document, none of this software has a bug in it or a problem that is going to actually let you print it anyway, right? Like, that's how it works. And this does work. I mean, there are slightly obvious problems with the fact that one vendor has to sign your entire software stack from bottom to top, and that the whole thing is bug-free. That's relatively tricky. It does work. Unfortunately, you're only going to see that in a Windows, probably a Windows environment. It's a pretty tricky thing to get right, and there is a lot to get wrong there. Another thing that's often talked about is end-to-end encryption as a panacea for everything. And yeah, this is really great in a consumer context, because perhaps you don't trust where the documents are stored in a consumer context. You know, you trust your friend, and he trusts you, but you don't trust the central management system. And so with strong cryptography and cleverness, you can make sure that the guy in the middle doesn't understand it. But if you want to deploy this, typically you lose the ability to control what's going on in the client. So the question is the client very secure in itself? Like, is this, if you could choose, would you trust all of your random devices at the edge of the network, or would you trust your system administrator? And I think it just depends. If you're in a business, you probably trust your sysadmin more than maintaining every kind of heterogeneous device of every version to make sure that's secure, right? But actually, worse than that, many of these end-to-end encrypted solutions are actually deployed via the web. So how do you know it's end-to-end encrypted? A whole load of JavaScript is downloaded from some central site that does something clever with your key, hopefully not sharing it with the world. But ultimately, you're running a whole load of software in an extremely insecure, environment that then manages all of this stuff. And it's really hard to see how that could end well. I mean, you can talk about man-in-the-middle attacks, but either way, there are a number of quite serious problems with that. So the approach that I like is this, and it's essentially unique, I would argue, that you leave, although with a more expensive hardware-wise VDI solution, you can do something similar by leaving the documents in the server. But we use a thing called secure view, and essentially the document is left on the server, and it never leaves the server. So you can lock it down so you can't copy, you can't paste, you can't print, you can't save, you can't download, you can't, we can turn lots of things off. It's no fun adding features to software unless you can also turn them off again. That makes sysadmins feel powerful and happy, so that's all good. And so essentially the documents never leave your site, and people can be given permission to do things with them, and those permissions are enforced on the server, not on the client, not in JavaScript. Many of our competitors, even very large ones, they'll send the entire document to the client as the first thing they do. They effectively download the whole document to run it, often in JavaScript, in the browser. And as we all know, if you press F12, you have a debugger in JavaScript. Everyone has a debugger deployed into their device that makes it easy to override, any kind of security policy there. So we think this is particularly awesome if you're a bank or a government or a 3-4-letter agency, this kind of thing. It's really, really cool. And we can watermark those, so the only thing you get is pixels on your screen, and if you take a picture of it, it has your name all over it. So the only thing you can leak is your guilt to lots of people. So that's pretty nice. Another key, and I'm really running out of time, so I'm going to speed up, is open source. I'm continually annoyed by people who believe that software can't be fixed. What you see is what you get should apply to documents, but not to the software. You know, you can fix the software, right? Like, you can make it better. And tell us about it. Get someone to do it. I think Clippy, for those who are old, was a one-line change, but it couldn't be turned off. You know, the last artificial intelligence assistant tool turned out to be a nightmare. And actually, it would have been really nice if the software was open and we could just turn that off. So really, open source is a prerequisite for digital security. So we'd love to liberate your documents together. Come join us. Get involved in open source document editing, best of breed security, interoperability. We'd love to see problem documents. If you have some, come and see me. We like to make it easy to manage centrally, and we're excited to be working with Univention. We love to be at the Univention Summit, and also, well, loads of other partners. Here are a few that are German-related, and yeah, it's great to do that together. I love Peter's emphasis here of working together to solve these problems. Collabora is a small part of a very rich ecosystem around open source, and we love to be that. If you're passionate about documents and collaboration, come to Cool Days and talk to me. And that, I think, is nearly it, which is good, because that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Michael.